Hi, welcome to the channel today. Today we're going to be going over my top 10 fruit plants that grow in containers or do well in containers. I did not put the top 10 that are easiest to grow because I think that can kind of be misleading. These all grow well in containers, but there is sometimes some caveats, some small areas that if you don't do it right, they don't do well. So I hate to put easiest and you've tried it and they died and you're thinking, but you said they were easy. I also don't want you to try something, think it's going to be easy, and then you get into it, and I make the channel not necessarily to try to make me look good, but just to help y'all make informed decisions of whether or not you want to try to do this, and some things you may not want to, so you save your money. To me, the worst thing you can do is go to a store, buy a plant, and then try to figure out, how to grow it after the fact. I've done that, all right? But it does make things kind of complicated. I know sometimes you go looking at pets and things, you kind of do the same thing. You'll find a neat looking lizard, and you get it, and then you take it home, and you realize, oh man, this thing gets this big. So the first one I'm going to be talking about, and I did do an in-depth video of it. I will put that in the comment section or in the description, is blueberries. Now, many people have tried blueberries. Many people have failed at blueberries because blueberries do really well. This particular plant here has probably been in this pot, the same exact pot, for the last 10 to 12 years. It has survived Harvey, in which the water was 8 foot to 9 foot over top of it for several days, for probably 7, 8 days. Survived that, but the one thing they have to have on the blueberry is they have to have a low pH, 4.5 to 5.5. Actually, I did an in-depth video about this. There's also sometimes people you need to have a proper potting mix, and if you're going to be growing in these plastic pots like this, a good potting mix is a 5-1-1, or it's 5 parts pine bark fines, 1 part perlite, 1 part peat moss. I did also do another video on that I'll put down there in the description, because they also demand you have to keep them moist, but they can't stand to be too overly wet. And what will happen is a lot of people, I've had some die on me too. I mean, I've got, I think, 5 of them that have lasted that long, but I probably had 10 of them, and the other 5 have died for different reasons. But one of the main reasons is over time, okay, stepped on something, make sure it's not a snake. Over time, this soil will collapse and it gets mushy, and it gets too wet, and the plant will die, and the roots rot. And if you just go to the store and buy a regular potting mix, a lot of times you'll still have a very low pH, but it just won't last very long, because that potting mix is made for annuals. It's not made for perennials, so it just doesn't last very long. It retains a lot of moisture, and that's okay in the middle of summer, but when you get in the winter time, they don't do as well. And on these 10 plants, almost all the ones I'm going to be talking about is perennial plants. They're also plants that you should be able to find fairly easy. This particular plant is a sweet crisp. It is a southern high bush. One thing to remember on blueberries is they kind of need cross-pollination. They'll produce a few berries without cross-pollination, but they really require cross-pollination to get a decent crop. And to get that cross-pollination, they have to bloom at the same time. There's 2 different types of blueberries that grow in the south. One of them is a southern high bush. It usually requires less chill hours. It also requires, they're a little more finicky on the pH. They have more of a bush type growth habit. There's also a rabbit eye that I didn't bring over here, I forgot. And it's a different type, and they don't cross-pollinate with each other for 2 reasons. One reason is these here will bloom about a month earlier, and I don't think they're also compatible as far as the pollen itself. Your rabbit eyes bloom about a month later, but they're easier to grow, but they do require a little more chill hours. And chill hours is a temperature between 32 and 45 degrees. It happens in the wintertime. And the further north you go, the more chill hours you have. You need to know your chill hours, because that's going to tell you what varieties will grow in your area. And that's true. Almost all these fruit plants that I talk about will have a chill hour requirement. Some of them it's not that big, but don't just walk into the big box store and say, hey, this plant will work for me. a lot of times those big box stores will go out and they'll buy all their plants for Texas. At least that's what it appears like to me, because I've seen, you know, and I'll use Tractor Supply as a one time we went we had the flood. I noticed that I went to our local Tractor Supply here in Beaumont, and they had the same plants there as we had in Waco, or even north of Waco. And those two different growing climates, two different chill hour climates. But and I think even in Dallas it's the same way. So they kind of buy them in bulk. So, you know, some of them will do good in some areas, some won't. If you get one that's too high too high of chill hours, it just won't bloom for you. If you get one that's too low, it may bloom too early. And I'll talk more about that on our next plant. But anyway, like I say, you don't want to let a blueberry dry out. That could cause a lot of problems. You may say, well, it dried out, but I watered it, it would pop back up. But when they dry out, you kind of destroy the roots. So if they completely dry out on you, you might have killed that plant and just don't know it yet. So, you know, that's very important. But then again, you don't want to keep them too wet. Now, I have grown one in a fabric pot. They didn't work well for me because I had some in fabric pots and some in plastic pots, and the fabric pot would dry out too much, and that's one reason that it died on me. The other thing that I've noticed with blueberries, if you'll notice on this one here, this is the only one I've repotted. And if you'll notice, there's not many roots right through here, but there's plenty of roots right here. Here's the part that I repotted. You just don't see a whole lot of, now there's some. So maybe over time it's fine. They don't seem to push their roots out as much as some of the other plants. So, you know, that's another thing to consider. Personally, I like to put, if I'm going to plant a blueberry plant, I'm going to put it in, if I'm going to put it in this size pot, I'll take it from that little 4-inch square deal that you buy them in, or a gallon one, and put it in that size pot. I don't pot up my blueberries. The rest of the trees I do, and that may be me, I may be wrong on that. But to me, I like my blueberries to be in the pot that I want them, because one time I had one that I planted in a pot about this big, you know, deep, and I put it in a 5-gallon bucket. It stayed there for about 6 months. I gave it to a friend of ours, and I was gonna put it in the ground, so we dug the hole, and when I pulled it out of the pot, all the potting soil fell off of it, and it was still, all the roots were still in that little small area. They hadn't ventured out. So that's kind of, like I say, that could be an outlier, but for me, I like to go ahead and put them in the pot that they're gonna be in. The problem with that is if you put them in a little pot and you keep it wet, the outsides of it's gonna stay too wet and the middle's gonna be too dry. So that's why they kind of like to pop things up. I don't do it on my blueberries. The next plant we're gonna be talking about is gonna be peaches. And I usually always say peaches because nectarines can be a problem. Nectarines have a smooth skin on them. They're basically the same as a peach, but that smooth skin will make brown rot worse. But you know, these two, this is not shaped very well. This is a flat wonder peach tree. It's produced peaches every year. In fact, it's got a peach on it right now, because they sometimes will bloom in the fall. It's not gonna make, but bag one. And then the other peach tree I was gonna show you is actually an Aprium tree. But this is more like the structure that you want on them. And it's doing well, it's grown well. It has not produced, because I just don't think it's a trilite Aprium. I just don't think it's a very productive tree. I don't know if it's not liking the chill hours or what, but this year when everything else bloomed, this one didn't bloom much. And you know, that's a bad sign when everything else blooms and this one don't. Because what happens if it doesn't get enough chill hours, and I don't know if that's the reason why it's not doing that, but if you have a tree that never seems to bloom, it may not be getting enough chill hours. If it's not getting enough chill hours, what'll happen is that that tree has a mechanism in it. When it gets enough chill hours and you get some warm weather, it knows this winter's over and it'll start blooming. If it don't get enough chill hours, even though you got that warm weather, it's still waiting to break dormancy. And it'll wait so long that the buds or the flower buds will deteriorate, and they won't, sometimes they'll bloom, but they're damaged and won't set, or sometimes they don't bloom at all. So that's why it's very important to get the right chill hours. My chill hours is about between 500 and 600 chill hours. I can go lower than that, because if I go lower and they set fruit, I can't put them in the garage, or I can put them up close to the house, and if we get some cold temperatures, and that way the fruit won't freeze on me. So it's not that big a problem for me, but if it's up around Dallas or north of Dallas, you do want to make sure you don't get too low chill hours. I try to stay, under 650 chill hours for my trees. If they get 750, 800 chill hours, I don't buy them. Alberta is a peach tree they sell around here every year. Its chill hours between 800 and 850, 850. We never get that, and they never produce any peaches for people, but they sell them every year. So that's the biggest knock on those. Now, these aren't regular rootstocks, all right? I like the regular rootstocks. There is a semi-dwarf rootstock that I cannot think of the name of it right offhand. I don't like it because it's susceptible to bacteria, canker, so it dies pretty quickly. And it has a poor root system, that's why it dwarfs the tree. They also have some miniature peach trees, and they just get about 6 foot tall. And the internodes between these are really short on those trees, so they just don't grow tall like that. And the only knock I have on those, I wanted to try some, but I haven't. You have to be careful because like Bonanza is one of them that, they'll grow, but they don't produce edible fruit. I mean, I guess you can eat the fruit if you're starving, but even the critters that say don't like it very well. It's just a poor quality fruit. They do have some that have been better. I can't think of the name of some both nectarines and some peaches that are miniatures. I just don't, if you had a miniature, I don't think they need this big of a pot. It's just something that it might be worth it. I don't know. And if I don't know, I'm going to tell you. But I've always just used a regular standard rootstock for them. Have not had a problem because that pot alone will dwarf that tree. This tree's not going to really be vigorous to try to grow really big because that pot's going to keep it from growing any bigger. And one other thing, I guess I'll mention, like I say, on the just make sure you get some good quality potting mix. Because like I say, this here I know it's been there 4 or 5 years. That potting mix is plenty fine. It's not collapsed. What happened is I collapse on you, and that's when it turns to mush. And if anything else, if you say, hey, I'm going to go out and buy some, at least put some pine bark mulch or something in it to give more so that those roots can breathe. Now we're going to walk over here to the Myers lemon. And I'm going to say this, Myers lemon does very well in a container. It does not do well indoors. It's kind of a diva indoors because it doesn't like the leaves to be, it doesn't like the change in the light. So if you brought this indoors for a couple of days, it's going to drop a lot of its leaves. But this thing's been very productive, and it has not had good, the potting mix inside of it's not a very good potting mix. I used one that was an organic one. I didn't put it still survived. It's kind of collapsed on me. I need to fix that. But as you can see, it's still producing fruit. And it's just, if you're going to do it on a Myers, a lot of times you can get it sometimes you can get it that's on its own roots. I like it better that way because that way if it does die back or you get a freeze on it, it kills the top, it will come back and it'll still be a Myers lemon. If it's been grafted, then if it dies back, it's going to come back to the graft and use it. And they're all the trees they graft to is a poor quality citrus. So if you can get it on its own roots, it's better. The other one I'm going to mention, number 4 on potted plants, is your Satsumas Mandarin trees. This one is about 3 years old, and like I say, it's got a lot of fruit on it. It's just now starting to ripen on it. You can get some good flavors on it. This, I think, is Clementine, if I remember correctly. Or Ponca. Ponca's been a good tasting one. You have to be careful about it because this one did split on me 1 year, and I kind of tried to tie it back together. But the good thing about the Satsumas is they're winter hardy. If it gets down to the upper 20s, I'm probably still okay. I will move up close to the house. But if we get 32 degrees or 30 degrees, it's not going to kill this tree. So I'm not having to pull it in and out all the time. That's why I say Satsumas. That's why I said Myers, because Myers can count a little bit of heat, a little bit of winter also. If you start getting into your lime trees, especially your key limes, some of your navel oranges and things, they can't take the cold as easy. So you have to be more careful about that. and may have to move things in and out. One other thing I was also mentioned, just in passing, whenever you got these trees, or these buckets like this, move them around every once in a while, because if you get a crack in them, or if you got, I don't subscribe putting hose in the bottom of them. Tree roots can get in these pots, and they can sap the moisture and the nutrients out of them, so that can be a problem. So just every once in a while, just take them, move them like that, and then you know that you've broken any roots that might have been in there, or at least you'll feel it sometimes. So that's just something that's I've learned to do. Now, number 5, I did cheat a little bit, because we talk about fruits, and this is truly a fruit, but most people don't think about it as a fruit, but it's tomatoes. Now, these particular tomatoes are my micro tomatoes. This is the pot they're going to be growing in. They've already got the fruit on them. Got some little tomatoes there. They're blooming out. Hopefully they won't get too many diseases with all this rain we've been getting and stuff. Got some bloom, one sitting over there. That's got some on it there. And these are micro dwarfs, so they can grow in pots this size. And the only biggest knock on a micro is they are, and this is as tall as they're going to get basically. They don't get hardly any taller than this. That's why they call them micros. But what I'm really going to mention today is dwarf tomatoes. Now, a dwarf tomato is going to get this height up to about 3 to 4 foot. They do really well in a 5-gallon container, so 5-gallon bucket. So if you got a 5-gallon bucket, you can grow tomatoes. If you try to grow a 5-gallon, if you try to grow a regular tomato, such as cherry tomato, sun gold, your celebrity, they're going to produce all the kinds of roots, all kinds of stems. They'll set the fruit on it, and then they're going to be starved for water. And you're going to have problems keeping them hydrated right. The fruit's going to tend to get brown rot in them. They're just not going to do well. Many people's tried it, and many people's failed. What the dwarf tomato plants do is they kind of cut that plant in half. And there's all different kinds of tomatoes now. There's over 100 different varieties. They're all different shapes and sizes of dwarfs. Now, the reason I'm carrying this is Craig LaHoulier did put out a book, and he talks about the dwarf tomato project and all the different tomatoes that you can grow with our dwarfs. If you notice, they're all different shapes, sizes, colors, and I'm a big fan of them. I think that they've done a really good job there. I think it fit a niche, because I'm not going to say niche. It fit a niche that we needed in the gardening community, because a lot of people don't have the space, but they want to grow tomatoes. And they want to grow some of the heirloom tomatoes or the bigger slicer tomatoes. That fits that niche. And so dwarf tomatoes to me is a win. It is an annual plant. And technically it's perennial, but most people treat it as annual. It's not cold hardy at all. But those are something that I think that is worth considering. If you tried before and failed, look up. I know Victory Seeds is one of them that sells the dwarf tomato seeds. The only thing I'll say is when you start, you have to start them probably from seeds, but they do get really small for a while, and they kind of sit there and they don't grow very fast. Give them time, because they are dwarf. It just takes a little bit of time. Well, these micros are even worse. I mean, they'll sit like this for a long time, then they'll finally start growing again. Because these tomatoes here are about 2 months old, I think. I think I grew them about a week after, or seeded about a week after the Labor Day. So however long that is. But I do think that's something that's worth considering, and I think I've planted them before. I've had good success with them. They're not going to produce as much, but they do produce a pretty good crop. And some of you, even the heirlooms, you get 2 or 3 crops, even if 2 or 3 tomatoes on certain ones, you've done pretty good even for a full-size one. So, and I have gotten several tomatoes off of a dwarf tomato plant. So, and I do like a bigger than 5-gallon bucket, but they would do okay in a 5-gallon bucket, and I have grown them in the 5-gallon buckets. So the next plant we're going to talk about, a fruiting plant, is going to be a blackberry. And I moved it over here. And this blackberry is a pumpkin blackberry. I do recommend getting the thornless varieties. You do sometimes have to be careful, because some of the blackberries have a higher chill hours. Pumpkin, I think, is around 400 or 500, so you don't have, most people can get that much. but some of the like triple crown and those I think require higher chill hours. And I like this one because it's a little bit, it doesn't show because I haven't pruned it right, but it's a little bit more compact. There's a Primark Freedom that's also some people will plant, and it's a good one too. I like the flavor of this one better. And but just 5-gallon bucket. I really thought it'd put more shoots out, but this is the first year. I planted it last year. It grew this year. Well, actually I grew it this year. It grew up like this, and then next year is when she said its first fruit. So, you know, it's worth trying, and I think they'll do well for you. A lot of people do raspberries. Raspberries just don't do very good down south. I think that will make a lot better production with blackberries, and these are good tasting blackberries. Used to the and they're good and pretty good size too. And there's a big freaking spider over there.
But not really coming through.
I'm glad I didn't run into it. That squirrel. That thing will make you move if it's landed on your neck. Remember that when we walk around. But anyway, there's also one called Sweetie Pie that's worked pretty good too. So, you know, you can get them at mail order. You know, they're not hard to come by. I think that some of you in the stores and Walmart and things are, you know, some of your Lowe's and things are starting to carry them. The only problem, the good thing about having thorns is they do keep the birds away. The bad thing about thorns, they tend to keep you away too, and I just get tired of getting stuck all the time. So anyway, the other one, number 7, and technically I have produced a pineapple. It's this one here. And this is an ornamental pineapple, and that's as big as it's going to get, and I didn't know that when I bought it. And it produced one on another plant, and this other plant, it produced another one, and that's as big as it's going to get. I thought if I put it in a bigger pot, it would get bigger. However, this one is one that I took from the store. It was a top, and I popped the top of it, I planted in the ground, and put it in the pot, and I up-potted to this size pot here. And I'm going to plant it in a bigger pot than that. You can also buy some online that you can buy with the little pups that buy it, and they're supposed to make quicker. I just don't know how long this is going to take to make. I'm going to put it in a bigger container. I've heard anywhere from people saying it's going to take a year to year and a half, to some people say they've had one for 3 years and hadn't produced yet. My theory is I don't think people are allowing them big enough containers. I think that might be one reason they're just not getting enough nutrients and stuff, but I could be wrong on that too, because normally if you put stuff in a smaller container, they actually produce quicker, but that may not be true on pineapples. But anyway, that's one that I'm still learning on. So I'm going to tell you the truth. If I've done it before, I haven't. I was able to say I produced all the fruit, so I did actually produce one there. I actually produced one that was edible, and that's that variety over there. And I also bought it at a nursery, but it produced one that was small and really didn't have that. And these are the pups that's growing off the side. Here was the stem where it came off of, and it was about that big,
yeah,
of the fruit part of it. So it did make, and we did eat it. So I didn't lie to you when I said I've grown them all. The next one that does pretty well in containers, at least at first, is your fig trees. And I got into fig trees really big, and the only thing I'll say on a fig tree is they tend to outgrow their pots pretty quickly, and I didn't take care of these. Is one reason we had problems with them. But I mean, every 3 to 5 years or 3 to 4 years, you're going to have to repot these because they're going to get too big, and you have to trim the roots, you have to trim the top, or you have to just start over again, take a clipping and start another plant. But they do tend to outgrow their pots pretty quickly. But you can grow them in containers. People's done it before. I think 5 gallons is a little bit small, but you can. And what you'll do with them is you do want to step them up. You want to start them in a small pot, get them a bigger pot, put in a 5 gallon, and then put them in one of those bigger pots that I have over there, and see how they do. some people put them in fabric pots. I think they're going to escape the fabric pot. They do have a very aggressive root system, and they will escape the pots pretty easy, which isn't a problem if you don't plan on moving them. And I had one that at the old house, and we had it in a pot, and it actually went out the side hole. And I actually put my hose in the side, and it actually put a root out the side of it, hit down the ground. It had a crack in the pot. It put a root down there, so I had like 3 or 4 roots that had gotten out. When we had to move, I had to get up underneath it with a saw and cut them off to replant the thing, because they will escape their roots. They do have a very vigorous root system, and so that could be a problem. I will just warn you about that, but that's one thing a lot of people do, and they will produce. You know, it's got a fig on it right now. It's probably not going to produce this year, but you know, that is a very doable one. They do have some dwarf varieties of figs, and if I was going to put it in a pot, I would get some of the smaller dwarf varieties, because just a regular fig, if you're an apartment or something, it's going to get too big too quickly. So I try to go with the dwarf varieties and see how they work for you. Number 9, and I've always said I'm trying to get ones that you can find in the stores and stuff. I didn't want to try to, you know, I didn't talk about Jabacabas and Cherry the Rio Grande and these different pots, the other ones I've got, just because it doesn't mean it's good to say, hey, this grows good in containers, but then you can't find them, or if you do find them, there's you know $75 to get them off the internet. To me, that's just too expensive. But the other one I'm going to talk about that might be a little harder to find is the Loquat Tree. And the reason I put these in a pot, I really like the flavor of the Loquats. Of all the fruits that you hear about, and I think this is a Yahula. I've heard a lot of different people that I've tried, and I've talked to people and say, oh, this is really good flavor. This tastes like cherry, or this tastes like this. This one does, to me, actually taste like apricot. It does have apricot flavor to it. Hey, boy, now girl. My dog wanted to know what was going on here and people talk. Now she's going to try to act like she doesn't pay me attention because she knows she's not supposed to be out. Okay, girl. And but they're good. I like the flavor of them. The bad part is, as you can see, they're starting to bloom out now. And for y'all that maybe later on, this is November 1st. This is when they bloom out. They're going to bloom out. They're going to set their fruit, and then you've got to keep those fruit from freezing. And they'll freeze about 28 degrees. The fruit will. I think the blooms can take down to 26. The fruit itself can only take down about 28. So guess what? I've got to take this. I can take this pot, move it up underneath there. If it gets down around, it's going to get in the high 20s. I'll sit underneath the porch. That should be enough to protect it. If it gets it lower than that, I can put it in the garage, and I can grow fruit with it, because it's going to produce fruit probably sometime in, I think, April is when it produces the fruit. March, April. I like the flavor of the fruit. It does have a big seed in it, or 2 or 3 seeds in it, but we enjoy the fruit flavor. It's just trying to get that thing. The tree itself can take down to 15 degrees or below. I had some trees that survived Snowmageddon when we got down to 11, 12 degrees here locally. Christmas freeze got down to the same temperature. They all survived, the in-ground ones. I put these inside, but getting that temperature right, the reason I put these in pots is just solely because I want to keep that fruit from freezing. So I can do that if I have them in pots. It's really hard to do if you've got them just in the ground. Tree lights and all that Christmas tree lights and all that sounds great, but when it's cold and it starts raining and you got electricity, and just something I don't want to mess with if I don't have to. I will do that to keep my citrus alive, but as far as trying to keep fruit alive, I don't think it's worth it. Number 10, I don't have a picture of it because it's one that I have not had good success with, but I got a different idea, and that's strawberries. A lot of people say strawberries are easy. It's a little bit harder down south because we got a lot of fungal diseases, things of that nature. I did try to plant them in this container over here, and what happened, I've got a big tree there, oak tree back over here, and basically the roots from those trees, we had a drought, the roots of those trees took over this raised bed, and then whenever I planted the strawberries, they got dry and they died. And I didn't realize it because all that trees were sucking the moisture out of it, and also sucking the nutrients out of it, and they just didn't do well. And when I dug it up, I realized that, so I dug all the way down to the bottom and killed most of the roots, or at least knocked them back. And that's the problem with strawberries, is you can't dig them back up hardly. So what I'm going to do next year, and there's a lady, Feed the Garden, I believe it was her, that showed how to do it on a green stalk. And I've been thinking about doing that too. You may check her channel out to see how she did it. I'm going to do one probably sometime next year, this time of year. I'll try it also and see how it works for me. But strawberries are supposed to be easy to do. I've got a guy locally that says he got strawberries and they're too thick for him. But I'm going, okay, I'm not. But strawberries is something I've struggled with, and sometimes even stuff that may do well in containers, you may struggle with for whatever reason till you find out, what you have to do. I think also with strawberries, you may have to put some fungal applications on it because we get so much rain. But we'll see. I'm gonna play with that some more because it should be something that's easy, but I've just struggled with personally myself. And then kind of a bonus round on it. There's one I want to start trying. So if you've tried it, let me know. I've just found out about it. I'm a little leery because I've never had the fruit itself, but it's called pineapple guava. And pineapple guava, you can now, I think they came out, really started pushing them around 2014 or somewhere around in that area. They're kind of the new fruit that everybody's talking about. Used to talk about jujubes, and I tried jujubes out in the garden, and I did not like them, and they root sprouted really bad. And I spent all this money. I spent a couple $100 buying the trees, putting them in, doing all that, and then no one in the family liked them. So I'm a little hesitant to do it with the pineapple guava for the same reasons. And also they're not self-fertile, even though sometimes they'll say they're self-fertile. From people that's actually growing them will say, yeah, you better get 2 or 3 varieties to make sure they have that. But that might be one you want to try too. And if you've tried it and had success, let me know. Because that's one I'm thinking about doing, but I don't know for sure if I'm going to or not. And then I'm going to talk about 10 things right now to help you succeed in the container fruit gardening. Okay, I'm going through these pretty quickly. First off, well-drained potting mix, because that's the first thing that's going to happen is your potting mix can collapse. It's going to cause it to die. Number 2, be aware of your pH. That pH will continue to creep up, and even some things like citrus can creep up too high, so you may need to put something like ammonium sulfate or something to bring that pH down a little bit, especially if you're in limestone country where you have a lot of bicarbonates in your water and you use tap water, because that will bring your pH up pretty quickly. So, that can also be a problem that you may not think about. It's a really bad problem with blueberries, but even citrus sometimes that pH can get too high on you with it. I use synthetic fertilizers on my container fruits. The reason is synthetic fertilizers, they're like that. You put it down, within a day or two, it's in the plant. If you put organics, it takes time. Organics also tends to hold too much water. Your compost, your alfalfa, pellets or whatever you put in there. I tried to have pellets on blueberry one time, set them around, and of course I put too many in it, but I lined it kind of like with covering, and it just made a soggy mess. And it ended up that I seen what was happening. I pulled it out, but that blueberry continued to go on downhill and end up dying on me. So I don't think, to me, there's nothing natural about growing fruit in a plastic bucket. So, don't be scared about the synthetics, because it will give you have to put them out every week or at least once a month. Something like that. Watch your plants, see the vigor on it, how much you need. Put a complete fertilizer on it, because you're going to need all the nutrients in it. You're going to need the boron, you're going to need the iron, you're going to need manganese, magnesium. You can't just use a balanced fertilizer. You have to have a complete fertilizer. And sometimes that's hard to get with your organics. So to me, I use synthetic fertilizers for that. Be careful of your wind. Your wind will blow these over. I mean, this may look like a big pot here, but if you notice, I've got a T-post, small T-post driven in the ground, because this thing will blow over pretty frequently. Even though it's kind of protected from the house and all that, and that tree, it will blow over, and even my bigger pots will blow over. So sometimes you may have to put a stake or something down to keep it from blowing over. The problem with the blowing over is you can break limbs, and also you can knock the fruit off the tree. So That's not a good thing. It will happen on occasion. The other thing you have to consider, if you're growing fruit in a container, you got to water every 2 to 3 days, even if you got these bigger buckets. 5-gallon bucket, you may need to water every day in the middle of summer. And then in the wintertime, you'll back off. As I said before, the easiest way to tell if I need to water something, because even today, when I picked this up, it was kind of heavy, so I know it don't need to be, he'd add any water to it. The other day it was really light, so I had to water it. And just picking it up, or just, you don't have to pick it all the way up, but if it's, I can tell it's got some heft to it, so I know it does need watering. But 30-gallon containers is better than a 5-gallon container. And mainly, it'll produce a bigger tree. It also wouldn't need as much watering, because 5-gallon bucket, this size, I probably water in the summertime. I might get by with every other day, but I know I can't get by for 3 days. So just something to consider. The containers themselves will dwarf the tree. You don't have to have a dwarf plant necessarily, unless it's a fig. But even those loquats, you see it's not growing huge, that will dwarf the tree somewhat. So especially when you get around to your peach trees, just buy the regular rootstock. Citation was the one that's a dwarf, semi-dwarf for peach trees. Don't like it, just get your regular, Nemagard or Lovell rootstock, and it'll do fine for you. Do need to check chill hours. I'm going to re-emphasize that, because you don't want to doom yourself from the very start. Make sure your chill hours are right. Make sure you don't have a tree that has too high chill hours for your area, or it's not going to do well. It's just, the other thing to consider is when you put something in the bucket, the roots are up exposed. They're not going to be as winter hardy, because when you look at a fig tree and they'll say, oh, a fig tree, this variety may be winter hardy to zone 6, and we're in zone 8. Well, if we have a really cold freeze, it's going to kill this. It has potential to kill these fig trees. Just because these are more exposed, it'll freeze this whole bucket, and that can kill the tree. Where if it was in the ground, it wouldn't do that. Especially when you're down south, because you're going to think, hey, I don't have any problems, the ground doesn't freeze. This bucket will freeze before that ground will. So be aware of that. The other thing that I will mention, I have one more thing, but number 10 is, once you plant something in a container, okay, and you plant this, let's say this, not so much fig trees, but if this is a peach tree and I had a 5-gallon bucket and I've been growing through it for 2 or 3 years, it's not going to do as well when you plant it in the ground. If you decide, if you're going to be a couple years from before you move, say you're in an apartment, you're going to a couple years, you can get a house or something. It sounds like you could actually grow them in buckets for a couple years and plant them. Things that are bare rooted would do better than things that's grown in a bucket and in a container. It doesn't make sense, but that's what I found out. I can order trees online, and I have a better growing tree than if I buy one at the store that's in a container. So just kind of remember that. Once these roots get to growing around like that, sometimes they continue to grow around like that. And once a tree is, once you get that tree satisfied, then it's going to, it's just not going to want to branch out. Where a root, when they cut those roots and he's got 2 or 3 roots, it will. It's something that to me ought to be the opposite, but from what my experience and what other people's experiences have been, it's not that way. I always thought that a container grown tree would grow better and do faster than a root, a bare root tree, but I found it to be the opposite. So anyway, that's before I talk too long, and hey girl, that's kind of the video for today. Glad you watched it to the end. See you later.